I hate to be cliche, so I always, like when a holiday comes up, like Valentine's Day, have you noticed that I rarely ever will talk about love on Valentine's Day? Or, like Mother's Day or Father's Day come around, and I just have a hard time being overly cliche. But it's fun. It is Thanksgiving week, and this week I actually do want to share a little bit about thanks. Because, thanks and Thanksgiving is a really significant part of who we are as sons and daughters of God, right? Would you guys agree with that? And so, yeah, absolutely. So I want to share a little bit about that this morning. When I was in high school, I was in one of those show choirs. I loved show choir. Actually, in college too. It was one of those things. Did I make fun of people like you? I bet you did. I know. I heard you, Lana. I heard you saying things about me.
I had to repent.
I know. I have to admit, I loved it though, because I was the shy kid, growing up, really shy. People would tell me that all the time, you're so shy. I'm like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, okay.
That makes you feel more uncomfortable about it. But when I started, doing performing groups in high school, it kind of got me out of that shell a little bit, made me feel more comfortable just around people and people staring at me all the time. So, but no, it was fun. I remember one year though, actually I think it might have been even my first year in high school of doing show choir. And we had a performance, and it was one of our first performances. And what happened, it was at an elementary school right down the street from my house. And it wasn't for elementary school kids. It was a special event, and it was adults that were there. And so we show up, and a lot of our group did not show up. There were people missing. And when you have a certain size group, and you're dancing with a partner, when that partner doesn't show up, it's really awkward, right? Plus the sound, because you've got 4-part harmony going on, and the sound just isn't the same, okay? And so it was, from our perspective, it was a horrible performance. We just really struggled through it. We felt like we were off our game, not a great way to start the year of performing. But afterwards, people come up to you and they say things like, "Hey, great job," or "Hey, great show. I really enjoyed that." And what happened is I found myself saying, "Oh, thanks. I just wish that blah blah blah. Oh, it wasn't our best performance." All of us were kind of saying things about how bad the performance was in response to somebody saying, "Hey, thank you for coming and doing this." You know what I mean? And I will never forget. It's, those words that someone important in your life says to you that just they stick and you take them with you for the rest of my life. And it was such a simple thing, but our director, and I don't remember if he said it to me or to the group as a whole, but I do remember him saying, "Just say thank you."
Thank you.
That was it. Just say thank you. And I was but it was wrenching to me, right? Because I wasn't saying thank you. I was telling people all the reasons why this was bad and it didn't go well. And I learned a lesson that day. I was so caught up in my expectations of what should have been that I forgot that our efforts could even really be appreciated by other people. In fact, maybe no one really even had a clue that our performance was suffering. Maybe they thought that guy was supposed to be dancing by himself. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they couldn't tell that the 4-part harmony wasn't just right, Maybe they still just enjoyed it and didn't even really care that it wasn't a perfect performance. They were just enjoying the show. So there are times that it seems difficult to just simply appreciate things for what they are. And I think we can start creating expectations around what we what we expect, right? What we think, how we think the things should be. And so there are things that I believe are constantly devaluing our sense of appreciation and thankfulness, especially cultural things. And three of them that I thought of right offhand. One of them is consumerism. This consumer culture that we live in. And we're constantly faced with that, aren't we? Like, I'm a marketer. I'm in online marketing. That's like my day job, okay? And so I'm constantly trying to find reasons why someone should buy what we have to offer. And so I'm coming up with every benefit for them. Like, you have to have this because when you get this, this is what's going to happen to you. And guess what? Those words are influential, right? People read that and they're like, oh my gosh, I've been missing this in my life. And I have to have it now, right? We all do that, whether we want to admit it or not, all right? And so we're constantly faced with that. We're bombarded with that. It comes in our email. It comes when we're, surfing the web. We see, billboards around us all the time. It's on our TV. It's in our, we're listening to Pandora radio, and there's an app. Like, we're bombarded with advertising, right? And it pulls us. It makes us feel sometimes like I don't have enough. I'm missing something. The other, I think, is related to it, and that's kind of the comparison culture. Comparison looks at not what we're missing, but what others have that we're missing, right? And it makes us feel like we're the have-nots because we look at other people and we see the great abundance and great things that they have. And I think this has become even more of a challenge, and I think especially for the younger generation with social media. Because, you go on places like Instagram and you see all these pictures of people in their perfect lives, right? There are people that spend hours trying to make perfect pictures so that they can post them on Instagram these days. They really are. They really are, so that they can place things just right and make everything look like it is, like, great in my life, and we sometimes look at that, and I'm just going to be honest. I'm going to be honest with you. There is a social media network that I don't spend a lot of time on because I have some friends who are very successful in ministry, and sometimes there was a while that I was seeing them post all this stuff and I was getting really jealous. I found that I was getting jealous of it. I was like, this isn't the Lord. Like, I love what I've got. Like, and I love what the Lord is doing. And I have so many stories of what God is doing. Why would I be disappointed with that? It's just that comparison. And the other thing is circumstances, right? And this is being controlled by our circumstances. It's where our circumstances, where they affect me and they influence me. Who I am going to be today depends on how you treat me and whatever unexpected events come my way today. It's kind of like where our emotions get the best of us and our emotions begin to control us. However we feel is how we respond. Okay? We respond to how we feel. And all of these, I believe, stand in direct opposition to the will of God for us.
Amen.
Direct opposition. Instead, God desires for us to have this culture of thankfulness in our lives. So this morning, I want to share some thoughts on that and hopefully get God's perspective then on thankfulness. Because I think, first of all, that thankfulness is a litmus test of our hearts.
Wow.
A litmus test of our hearts. And it's not faith, right? But thankfulness to the Lord shows the strength of our faith. And it's not hope, but our gratefulness for what has happened in the past certainly is an indicator of what we might expect for the future. Hopefulness, right? And it's not love, but thankfulness towards someone certainly reveals our capacity to love them, right? If I'm thankful for you, then there's a good chance I love you, I love you. And so it's a test. It's not forgiveness, but thankfulness towards someone would be a pretty good sign that forgiveness, if it's needed, has taken place. You see what I mean? You see why it's a litmus test? We can kind of gauge kind of where we're at in our faith and our trust in God by our level of thankfulness. So thankfulness helps us to see really what's happening deeper inside of us. Jesus was passing a group of people. He was on the border between two regions, okay? One was the region of Galilee. The other was the region of Samaria. These were not two friendly regions because the Galileans, those were like the full-blooded Jews, full-blooded monotheistic Jews, okay? Jerusalem and, that whole area too, like those were the people that they were the true worshipers of God, right? And then there's the Samaritans, which are kind of like, hey, these are kind of like the mixed breeds. Like, they kind of wandered away from God and kind of started following other gods and doing their own. You know what I mean? So there's kind of this tension. Well, on the border between these two areas, there was a group of people with leprosy. Now, you probably have heard a little bit about leprosy, but basically it's a disease. What happens often with leprosy is people lose their nerve ability to feel things. And so they could be injured repeatedly and not actually feel that, okay? And then that there can be, boils and there can be deformed joints as a result, skin things that happen as a result of leprosy. And so when people would look at somebody with leprosy, though they rejected them. They had to put them together, and they kind of hung out together because they had to like cry out even if they were passing by so people could get out of the way. So they were not treated well. But Jesus always loved them, right? And so this group is like, there's a group of 10 people with leprosy and they're crying out to Jesus. And they're like, Jesus, have pity on us. Have pity on us. And you know what? Guess what Jesus' response was? He did, right? In fact, I think this is one of the greatest miracles. Sometimes we look at miracles and we're like, he healed a person here and he healed a person here. He healed all 10 of those guys. All 10 at once, right? He said, you know what, you guys? I want you to go ahead and go to the priests. And so all of them, as they were on their way to the priests, they were all cleansed and healed of this disease. Pretty amazing. But it's interesting what happened after that. Because Luke tells us that wasn't the end of the story. He could have stopped there, right? Like miracles, the miracles of Jesus. But there was more of the story that Luke wanted to make sure that we saw. And what happened is there was one of those 10 guys that came back and tracked Jesus down. Why? Because he wanted to fall at his feet and thank him and give praise to God for what happened in his life. And Jesus' response, it was like, hey, where are the other 9 guys? What happened to them? Interesting question. It doesn't really get answered, but I think it's a big question, isn't it? That Luke really wanted to highlight. The other thing that Luke highlights, okay, and just in the Gospel of Luke, one of his big messages is the kingdom of God. What is the kingdom of God? Well, healing is a part of the kingdom. Okay? When the kingdom of God comes near, healing is one of the things that takes place. So you always see these miracles of Jesus. The other thing that Luke highlights is how those that were considered social outcasts are actually invited to be part of God's kingdom. And so he also points out that this guy who came back to Jesus was not the true Jew, following after the one true God. It was actually one of the Samaritan guys. And so he's jabbing a little bit here. Like, hey, you Jews that think you've got it all right, Jesus loved these guys too, just as much. And you know what? Sometimes these guys